Welcome to another episode of Preparing for the Unexpected. I'm your host, Alex Fullick, and as always, we like to talk about things related to resilience, business continuity, emergency management, COVID, anything that helps you, your organization, or your community prepare for, respond to, and overcome adverse situations. If you'd like to be a guest on the show, please feel free. You can find me on LinkedIn. I'm the only Alex Fullick there. You can reach me, send me a note, and I do respond to everything I get. Alternatively, you can find me at alexfullick.com. One quick announcement. At this year's BCI World Conference in November, I will be giving a keynote with Margaret Millett. Yes, I'm really excited about that. So hopefully you can join us at BCI World in November. As you can tell by the background and by the screen here, it's time for This Week in Business Continuity with James Green. James, welcome back.
Alex, I'm back.
Yeah.
It's been 2 months.
It has. It's been a while.
2 months since our last episode. I'm excited to be back here and to be with you.
And you sound better. You look better. So I'm glad that you're on the mend and we're able to make it today.
Thank you. I appreciate that. For your audience, you probably should have recorded. Alex and I were on a call the first week I got sick, and I'm sure he can blackmail me with video of that call because I was not doing well at the time, and worse than I thought. But I'm glad that wasn't recorded. Let's just put it that way.
No, it was not recorded, but would have been interesting, just seeing the difference between then and now. So
exactly.
So we got a couple of things you want to talk about. As always, James sends me links to a whole bunch of different articles and things that are going out there. And the first thing, James, you want to talk about is something in Singapore.
Yes, let's start in Singapore. I spent a week in Singapore 4 years ago. Anything pre-COVID is several years. Yeah. And I've wanted to move there ever since. I'm not going to lie. But the Monetary Authority of Singapore has business continuity guidelines that I am painfully aware of. So one of the things I was doing in Singapore was pitching, my wares to prospects. And we had a prospect who wanted us to map everything in the software that I was working with at the time to the Monetary Authority of Singapore's BC guidelines. We did all that work, and then they didn't go with us anyways. The reason I share that story with you is I've kind of just followed along with the Monetary Authority of Singapore's BC guidelines ever since, just out of curiosity or fascination or grudge. But last week, not that I'm bitter, but I did love Singapore. Last week, they released revised guidelines specifically based on lessons learned from COVID. So you and I have spoken over the last couple of months that we thought this was going to happen. Here is the first one that I can find. If there's another one that anyone else has, please share it with us. But now that it's happening, I'll ask you again, should we be expecting a wave of COVID-related BC regulations? And my second question to you, will that mitigate any risk or make anyone safer?
Well, I don't know if it'll make anyone safer, because that would have to mean that everything the next situation unfolds exactly the same way.
Correct.
And unfortunately, disasters do what they want to do and will unfold the way they want and the time frame they want and impact what they want. So obviously, lessons learned can help us so that we can at least take a small step forward and give us hopefully the wherewithal to understand that, oh, here's an early warning sign. Let's think about this and think about that. So it could help people, but it's not a perfect predictor of what's going to happen, because, like I said, things will happen as they happen. And what was the first question again? Sorry.
Should we expect a wave of these COVID-related regulations from government authorities?
There will be something, because everyone's going to want to, show that they've learned something and they did something about it. Whether it's going to add value to everybody, we don't know. It depends on what it comes out. We're already seeing all that kind of stuff come from vendors who say, this is what organizations say, when really what they're saying is this is what our customers are saying. But everyone's going to put out something like that. I think BCI will, DRJ will. You just go down the list. Everyone's going to put something out. The one thing about this one, this is you can't see it, the Singapore, for what was it, Monetary Authority. I thought this was rather interesting. It doesn't hold any different information that I haven't found somewhere else. For the most part, it's just put into their language, the same thing. One thing in here I did find interesting is that they included a list of contingencies in their, what section they called it, concentration risk, where they actually provided some guidance. If you encounter anything like this before, separate your work functions, put them in different buildings, send your people home, and a couple of other suggestions like that, which I thought was rather strange to incorporate in a document like this, which is talking about financial implications and business continuity management, making sure you have that in place, but then suggesting what you should do about it. And I thought that, well, I could understand that, but I figured that might be a separate document or a separate release. So it was kind of interesting to see that combined in here. The other part of that I also found interesting is that not Singapore, sorry, Hong Kong, I shouldn't say just up the waterways, but not that far away, experienced SARS, and they had the same kind of situation. Singapore wasn't far away, so they already had the same learnings there already. So it's rather interesting for it to suddenly show up now when a lot of the things that they've put in here have already been in place with a lot of organizations. I know I've seen it in Canada because we obviously global pandemic, but we also had SARS in a couple of locations here. And I was even impacted by it, having to separate my team, the team I was on, to two different locations and working from home as well. So those things suddenly appear in here, 20 years later, almost 18 years later, something like that. So it seems rather strange to incorporate this information in here. And I think a lot of places are going to start doing that. It's providing a lot of some of their lessons learned, but also suggestions for contingencies, and action plans to take if something happens again. What were your thoughts when you saw it?
No, definitely very interesting to have action plans, contingencies in a government issued guideline. And the concern I have, like you, is bloat over time, that these documents are going to be hundreds of pages from regulators that include every type of contingency.
Yeah, and when you get everybody doing that, I'm sure the Canadian government will have one, the US government will have one, FEMA, WHO, CDC, you name it, they're all going to put something out. Well, after a while, there's going to be so much information out there, no one's going to pay attention to it.
Yep.
It will become information overload. So which one do I pay attention to? Well, I'm not going to pay attention to any of them. I'm going to do what I know and what I've experienced, and maybe some lessons learned from a couple of colleagues, and that'll be it.
Yeah, I wonder if it's going to give rise to a new set of vendors. So if you look at the privacy profession, every jurisdiction has different privacy laws, regulations, requirement, to the point now that there's all these software vendors that will tell you what you need to do in each jurisdiction and how to be in compliance. And I worry if you have all of these different jurisdictional BC regulations, maybe that's a nascent market that we're going to see pop up. How are you, if you're a global company, how are you going to stay in compliance with BC regs, in 50 different jurisdictions? So anyone out there watching, that's a free software idea for you. And when you make it rich, Alex and I'll sue you.
Yeah,
but no,
because we've got it on tape.
But I worry, I don't want us to go in that direction. right? Where privacy compliance now for most organizations is not ensuring your data is safe. Unfortunately, most of their time is now ensuring you're in compliance with regulations, which misses the underlying, is my data encrypted at rest, in motion, safe? And now it's, am I in compliance with regulations?
Well, the other piece that happens there too is once you get too many regulations and too many, authority documents like this, after a while they start, and it happens every single time in everything, start contradicting each other. How can I be compliant in the US by doing this and not be compliant in, well, we'll use Singapore because I've got it in my head. In Singapore, if I do that, if I meet Singapore, then I'm going against what's over here. So how do I do that? And they're going to start contradicting each other and make it harder, as you say, for organizations.
We'll see what happens.
Well, let's take this another step forward, because you were talking about software and things like that. One of the other things that happened recently, and I thought this was a rather interesting thing you sent me, is Google places an engineer on leave after claiming its AI is sentient.
Yes.
So I thought, okay, so where are we going with artificial intelligence, AI?
Yeah, so Alex, as you know, I gave a talk at Continuity Insights in April called "Will We Need Business Continuity in an AI World?" That talk was not well attended or well received. So I appreciate you being there and being the only person awake. But, so ever since then, last week, Google placed Blake Lemoine, an engineer working in its responsible AI division, which sounds like an amazing place to work, on leave because he wrote a blog post claiming that one of its AI had become sentient. This reminds me exactly of how the movie Terminator started.
Yeah.
So I'm a little worried there. Now, my first question, are we closer than I thought we were in April when people thought I was running around with a tinfoil hat? Is this going to happen in our lifetime? And if so, will BC Software run our profession? It was a really crazy, crazy week last week with Google.
Well, the first part, at some point, AI will have some sort of sentience about it.
In your lifetime or no?
Well, I'm going to say yes. To some degree, yes, because things are happening, the last 50 years, 100 years in human history, we've been coasting along like this, and now we're going straight up, basically,
yes.
With our knowledge and new technologies and things like that. So I would guess that yes, AI would evolve to something on that state. How much really depends on us, because AI works on what we feed it, right?
Correct.
So if we don't feed it certain aspects, well, then it's not going to reach it. But if we are feeding it all kinds of data, then at some point it's going to be able to read that data and put things together. We've already got supercomputers that have been on Jeopardy and, have done super things. What's that? The IBM, I forgot IBM's name for it. Deep Blue, yeah. That's already there. And it's smarter than I am when it comes to Jeopardy. So I think that is going to happen at some point. The part that's missing, I think, is the human aspect of good judgment.
Correct. And
understanding, just because you have a whole list of contingencies or action plans and things like that, you have to be able to, how should I put this, read the room, so to speak, to see what's going on, how people are impacted, how they're reacting, to things. And AI might not be able to do that. So it's not going to be able to, I don't think yet, establish itself to understand good judgment. Just because I have a list of things that need to get done doesn't mean I need to do them in that order or that they need to be done. I may need to change focus to go somewhere else because the public is not happy, or there were a lot of casualties at a certain terrible disaster or event or something. But it, as an AI, it may say, well, I'm not flesh and blood, so I don't understand that feeling, but I still have to go and get all these applications up and running, and that's where it'll focus. So I think can still help us with business continuity in that respect. Make sure when you're doing this, you have a dependency on this and that, and make sure this is contacted and this is up and running and these are connected and things like that. But I think when you throw in the people aspect, that's going to be a lot harder, I think.
Yeah, and I'm hoping, and you and I spoke about this in April, I'm hoping that as software gets more intelligent, it allows us in our profession to focus on strategic initiatives and strategic decisions, and by the system, by the software, taking care of tactical tactical information, tactical data gathering, assessments, a lot of the things that we spend a lot of time doing now that are quantifiable. I would love to not ever do those and have those done by a system so that we can focus, like you said, on emerging risk, declining risk, things that are changing, really focusing on more of that thoughtful aspect of our profession that most of us don't have enough time day to day to do.
Yeah, and I think that having AI in the background to manage a lot of that stuff can help us focus on the aspects that are a lot tougher to deal with, which is the people aspects.
Exactly.
Using good judgment, in communication, and not just sending out a blank, sterile sounding communication template, but actually tailoring it properly to the needs of what's actually happening and what you're seeing and what people are feeling. And I don't think AI could actually do that kind of thing. And if it can, well, then maybe we start calling it HAL or something.
I think especially with cultural nuance too, is if you're using a mass notification system or you have a global business continuity program, you and I have chatted before, how you do that in different countries, even in different parts of your own country, are very different. And that's something that software gets wrong a lot, is, to your point, it sends out the same message globally, but it's going to be interpreted or misunderstood very differently depending on where you are in the world.
Yeah, and sometimes it comes down to even a word or two just in the same city that I'm in. You can send it out. If someone puts an inflection on a different word in a different way, it can totally change the meaning. And I don't see how AI could ever be able to fully grasp that. People can't. I don't know how a machine can.
We say that now. I look forward to eating our words in several months.
Yeah.
Just look at what's happened in the last 2 months compared to when you and I spoke in April, and then this news that broke last week, that was within 60 days. So very interesting.
But if you read it in the article, it gives a transcript, a little bit of a transcript of the conversation between the two, and it really sounds like AI was simply responding the way a person in general would, in a conversational manner.
Yeah, I read his whole, he wrote a post on Medium, and I read the entire thing, and it was, it was late at night last night for me, granted, but halfway through, I'm like, is this a machine or a person? The lines were getting blurred, definitely.
Yeah.
So even as just machine learning, I think it's phenomenal. So whether or not it's sentient or not, but just even if it was just regurgitating through machine learning, how sophisticated it's gotten is really amazing to me.
Yeah, I'm not quite ready to get the tinfoil hat yet, but
let's hope not. Let's hope not.
So let's move on to something else I thought was rather interesting when you sent this and I had to look at it. I had to deal with passwords.
Yes. When
people leave organizations and that.
Absolutely. So a recent survey conducted for Hitachi ID, and this blew my mind, found that 29% of the survey respondents said that they had experienced an incident in the last year where they lost access to a product or system because an employee left and no one had that password. So this had never occurred to me as a problem. So I'll ask you, have you ever considered passwords and access to passwords in any part of your business continuity planning? Because I have not.
I can honestly say no. And I can tell you why. Because I was thinking about this one, because I had to look at it, the report 2 or 3 times, and just going, there's something about this that's not making sense to me. And one of the pieces is when an employee leaves, if they're being let go, then I know from experience and from other managers and vice presidents, et cetera, they have already put in some sort of a ticket or some sort of a warning to a help desk or a support center saying, Alex is leaving, will be going today, their last day or whatever the case may be. So there's already a ticket to get access to that site, which they, in many cases, they already have anyway because their help desk is supporting them. So they have some sort of an administration password or access to get into some of these systems. So when I read this, I was wondering, going, well, what kind of system are they talking about or application where an end user is the only one who can get in to this application? That
So
was
I
the
think it
first thing that
actually
came to my head.
it happens more than you realize with shadow IT. I've worked with several clients through the BIA process where we've uncovered systems and applications and even equipment that IT had no idea
Mhm,
the
yeah,
business unit
yeah.
was using. So to your point, if everyone's going through their processes as intended, then yeah, IT would have knowledge. But we all know people download stuff or people use stuff or have a system. Or I was trying to find some real world examples of this morning, and I talked to an organization. I can't share their name, unfortunately, but they were telling me that they recently found out there's one person who runs a daily report, and that daily report feeds into all of these other processes. And the only reason they found out that the one person was the only one who knew how to access the system for the report or run the report is because the person's going on vacation for the first time and everyone's like, oh shoot, we're stuck. And so that is an example of, let's say that person up and quit today. Now no one would even know how to run that report, where that report is run. Or like I said, with shadow IT, if we run Slack or Asana or some other system that's not IT recognized and you or I are the admins, clearly 29% of respondents to the survey have had this problem. And I just got to thinking, you and I have spent a lot of time the last 6 months speaking about the great resignation. This is going to happen more. And I think we need to, as BC and resilience professionals, start asking these questions in our data gathering. Like, hey, we always ask about single points of failure. I've never asked about singular point of failure for a password, and I'm going to start. This survey really, I was like, oh, this one's really surprising to me.
Yeah, like I said, it was to me too, because my first thought was, okay, all your corporate apps and your regular apps, your help desk already has access. So what's the issue?
Yeah.
And then to your point, which makes sense because I've experienced the same thing too with a company I worked for many years ago. There was a little server underneath someone's desk. No one knew that it was there, except for obviously that person. And they had either, I forgot the exact details, but either kicked it or spilled something on it or whatever, and called the help desk and said, yeah, such and such is not working. And the help desk was, huh? What are you talking about? And that's how they discovered that this existed. And this whole development shop was using it, the entire area, and no one could access it. And that's how they found out. And obviously, they took it out of there and put it back in the operation center, et cetera. But I experienced the same thing with that. But we also asked that in BIA later on as well. using that example, is there anything else we need to be worried about?
Yeah.
What
And
else?
like you said, I think historically we thought of a server or a computer or a printer, but with more things online, I think people are going to have the same issue with a password. And so for the audience, if you've experienced this or even thought of this, we'd love to hear, or if you have examples, we can share it anonymously, because this one really got me thinking of all the passwords that only one person has, or the single point of failure that's a digital single point of failure. It has never occurred to me before we saw this article.
That you just got me thinking about something else, because you mentioned people who might be downloading other applications. A lot of organizations have it so that you can't download
Correct.
anything. So if they're using something external in the cloud or whatever and having access, gaining it that way, there's another issue now with security and potential data breaches to look
Yep.
into.
Well, yeah, I worked, kind of growing up, I worked in a lot of financial services firms where your desktop and laptop were locked down. You wanted to add a printer, submit a ticket. And
Yep.
then I was working for a company that wasn't in financial services. And I remember asking like, oh, hey, I need this application. And I was told, just go ahead and download it. I was stunned. I didn't even know I had admin rights on my own system. So it happens. It certainly happens.
Yeah, it's an interesting thing, because now you've got, I'm thinking more beyond than just what I was initially thinking when I read the article. That it's opening an organization up to other risks.
Correct.
With this, and not just can't access your data, but if someone's accessing something that they're using externally, you don't know they're using, your data could be compromised that way, or they could be, uploading your data to somewhere they shouldn't be, that you don't know about. So yeah, that really, I'm going to be thinking about passwords a little bit more, I think, going forward.
This is shaping up to be our out there episode. We've talked about AI and Terminator, and now the what ifs of passwords.
Yeah. Okay, so let's see, what else do we have here? We did our three big key ones here. You did this morning a Ask Me Anything. Did anything interesting come out?
Yeah, so I was asked to do an Ask Me Anything on my friend Illuminar, their LinkedIn page. I'd never done an Ask Me Anything. I was prepared for personal, professional, strange, sports, you name it. And there were two questions that I got that really stuck out to me. So I'm going to ask you these questions.
Uh-oh.
So the first, Jake Geppert asked, are KRIs and KPIs being utilized significantly in our industry? And if so, what are some examples of both? And I can give you my answer first, or you can answer first and have some.
Well,
just
my
throw you right
first
onto the
question.
spot.
My first question is KRI.
Key risk indicator.
Key risk indicator.
And key performance indicator.
Okay. Well, the KPIs, I think that's a hot topic right now.
Yeah.
Because after, I think a couple of things, but obviously after the global pandemic here, or as a result of the global pandemic, like some areas are still going on, that, and with business continuity in many instances being overlooked at the outset, people are trying now to look and find ways to show the value of business continuity rather than just saying we have a plan,
exactly.
Or we have a program. Now it's, well, prove your plan, your program has value to me. So I think, I don't know if there's a definitive answer right now, because different organizations are looking at things different way, and their culture will also lead you down the path of what indicators that your leadership wants to see. And you have to, if they want to see something that might be a little bit out there, well, you've got to figure a way of measuring that and how you're going to do that without maybe straying away from your certification if you're a certified organization. So you have to look for ways of things to measure that are going to make sense to the leadership in any industry and in any culture. And I don't think there's going to be one. There may be a set, let's say 10 standard measurements that get identified, but I think in the long run, there's going to be a lot more than that, depending on your industry. A manufacturer may not have the same indicators as a financial institution, which may not be the same as an insurance company or a pharmaceutical or something like that. So the risk indicators, well, I think it's almost along the same lines right now. I know from traditional thinking and being around for 25 years, the risk indicators were initially how vulnerable we are to a flood or a fire or things like that. I think now we have to, and you're the expert here, so I'm not going to say too much on this. I'm going to let you talk about risk more, the risk guru here. So, now that we are being forced to look at risk differently, that's going to drive a whole new set of indicators and how we identify it and how we measure it.
Yeah, absolutely. I like what you said about how KRIs and KPIs will be different for each organization, and they should be. Part of what I wrote was, I'm passionate about data because it gives us insight and also helps us show value to management. That's something that you and I have been speaking about, and people in our industry have been speaking about for years. I wrote, if at the end of the year you just say, well, we didn't have any disasters this year, how are you really showing value or what you accomplished? So I think it's really important to have data metrics in your business continuity and resilience program that make sense for your organization, because if not, it's really difficult to show value. Because if you're just saying, here's how many plans I updated this year, here's how many BIAs I updated this year, I guess I shouldn't say this, but people really don't care. That's not something that gets people to sit up and fund your program or promote you or get you working on new things. You have to have other metrics that are more meaningful to management, and agreeing on KRIs or KPIs within your organization, I think, is a great way to do so.
Yeah, updating a plan. Well, that's what you were hired to do anyway.
Correct.
So
that's
how is that a metric? That's just you doing your job, right?
Exactly. And then I got one other question I share with you. A lot of people talking right now about inflation, and not as a political hammer to complain about this political party or that political party, but in reality. So Sue Tandok asked me, how is the global supply chain being affected by the war in Russia and Ukraine, plus surging gas prices? And with inflation around the world, what are companies doing to maintain resilience? And I thought this was a really interesting question, because certainly a lot of organizations are responding to events in Europe, but I'm not seeing a lot of organizations outside of maybe the transportation industry that are proactively responding to rising gas prices, which is due to a lot of factors, but also higher than normal inflation. We've had very low inflation rates in the United States, particularly since the late 1970s. So most people who are in charge of organizations now were not in charge of organizations then. I thought it was a really thoughtful question. Alex, are you seeing any companies out there proactively doing anything about inflation from a business continuity or risk standpoint? I guess I'll stop there.
To be honest, no, I'm not really seeing a lot. I think, like most people, we're hearing about it in the news and nothing but complaints about it.
Correct.
But there isn't really any action being done. I know interest rates are being raised everywhere, in trying to curb it, but that seems more like a knee-jerk reaction than anything. So, but ultimately, and I'm not much of an economist or anything, so I'm not going to say too much here because I'll just make an absolute idiot of myself more than usual. So, but I'm not really seeing a lot of actionable, not a lot of action from organizations, just really complaints and,
Yeah.
things like that.
It reminds me of the Great Resignation, and that a lot of companies are talking about it, but not doing anything about it until people start to leave. And when you have inflation driving your cost up faster than you thought, it affects your supply chain, it affects customer demand. I think we're going to see some companies get into a bind really quickly and have cash flow problems because they're just not thinking about, like, the only conversations I've seen a few conversations. The most typical one is employees saying, hey, my cost of living increase this year did not match inflation. And companies are solely looking at this as a employee cost, but it's going to be everything. And I think we're going to see some companies have cash crunches because, to your point, they're paying attention, but not acting on it.
But, and there could be a spot here to, in fairness to organizations, that the bigger they are, the longer it takes to actually get something in place and to address it. Smaller companies may turn around and say, great, I'm changing suppliers. I'm going from that side of the city to this side of the city. But instead of using that gas station, I'm going to use this gas station, to keep, their part and cost down. But the larger organizations can't do that. They can't move quick enough. It's like government, it takes forever to get anything done. And it doesn't matter where you are, at least in the Western world, it takes forever to get anything done. So it'll be interesting to see what happens. And I think a part of it is, the global supply chain and the food shortages that may be coming soon, and the greater the less food or the less product, the greater the demand.
Exactly.
That's the nature of economics, right? So, or I learned that, remember that from Economics 101. So, well, anything else you want to share with us today? Any
I
other
have one last thing for you.
Yeah.
So the Stanley Cup Finals start tonight. My beloved Tampa Bay Lightning, as many of you know, Alex and I, our teams played each other in the first round. So I have a funny story for you, Alex.
Well, your team played. We just showed up, and that was it.
So game 7 of the first round, Tampa Bay Lightning at your Toronto Maple Leafs. I was I haven't shared this before. I was in the hospital that night. And I got my nurse to agree to let me watch game 7, but I had to stay calm throughout the entire game. And it was very surreal. So my wife and I were in my hospital room watching the game. I had a blood pressure cuff on the entire time that I was in the hospital, and I had to stay calm, which was very strange for me, one, in general, but two, watching a hockey game. So I don't think I will ever forget that hockey game, not because of the outcome. I'm certainly thankful that my team beat yours, so I can rib you on that for another year. But I never thought I would be in a hospital room for a game 7. So I'm very excited that my Lightning won that round and the next 2 rounds, hoping they do well against the evil, dreaded Colorado Avalanche tonight. So my prediction, because I'm a homer, is the Lightning in 6. Would love to hear your prediction for the Stanley Cup Finals.
Well, I'm rooting for Tampa as well. They've played unbelievably, and they deserve it. They've played just fantastic, and I'm all for it. So go Lightning. Can't believe I said that, but go Lightning. Yeah.
Strange. We live in strange times, Alex.
Yeah, we do. Well, James, we've come to the end of this week in business continuity, episode number 13.
Lucky 13. I love it. Looking forward to the next one.
Yep. thanks again, sharing your time and expertise. Really appreciate always chatting with you every month. Actually,
Absolutely.
we seem to talk a lot more than that recently, but that's
We
okay.
do. I love that we talk quite a bit these days. It's very exciting.
So thanks very much. And everybody watching and listening, stay prepared, everybody. If you like that video, thumbs up. If you didn't like that video, thumbs down. But leave me a message and let me know your thoughts. Of course, don't forget to subscribe. And in the meantime, stay prepared, everybody.